This is a spoiler-free review, just a heads up. Shazam! Fury of the Gods is an odd creature. Never before has a movie that was so otherwise charming and engaging for me had such an unbearably irritating lead character. In preparation for this film, I actually ended up rewatching the original Shazam for basically the first time since theaters. And while I remembered it fondly, I was a little shocked at just how well it's held up in the 4 years since. Seriously, 2019 Shazam is a capital G great superhero movie. As much a breath of fresh air now as it was back then, and I don't know exactly what it was that led to the seemingly slight but crucial change in approach that leaves Fury of the Gods a significantly weaker viewing experience. The foundation for something just as great is there, with Fury of the Gods following Billy Batson after he's grown well and truly attached to his foster family from the first film, to the point that he's become overbearing in his attempts to keep the unit together and is ironically pushing his siblings away with his desperation. When the super-powerful Daughters of Atlas arrive to challenge our heroes, themselves a group of feuding siblings, the stage is set for a truly compelling narrative. Without getting too deep into why I, of all people, should really be a layup for a story like this one. But the execution leaves some to be desired. Specifically, much like Mark Strong in the first film, the villains here sit just on the knife's edge of being really interesting thematic parallels, but don't quite make it and leave us with a somewhat generic doomsday scenario in the third act. But honestly, that's small potatoes, and I should mince no words. Zachary Levi, as our lead character, is the problem. An antagonist who's weaker than they should be is something that the first film overcame with aplomb, but a lead I just want to punch is a hurdle too high. 85% of what comes out of his mouth is some shallow, moronic quip or overlong ad-lib without even a real punchline to justify it. The grown-up, super-powered version of Billy Batson is a dang anchor around this movie's neck. Nearly every second he's on screen, I want to die. Even in the first movie, the guy was a bit of an issue, a popular criticism being that it didn't feel like Levi and Asher Angel as young Billy were playing the same character. And boy, is that more true than ever in this film. Levi's faux macho, slangy affect suited a character like Billy on paper, but in practice was just annoying. And here, the problem is 10 times worse on account of the real Billy barely being around to balance things out. And this is where the lead character would absolutely be a problem even if Levi's performance wasn't extremely obnoxious. In the first movie, Asher Angel was the window into the heart and soul that lay underneath all of the facade, and while by necessity all of the other child characters actually get to be their child selves for a healthy chunk of screen time, Angel is in the movie so little that I'm convinced the kid was on set for maybe a day or two max. What's worse is that it comes to the rare but pivotal moments where Levi actually has to play the drama, I don't buy it at all. It almost feels like he was on a one-man mission to emotionally sabotage the feature. Conversely, after his super persona, played by Adam Brody, is taken out fairly early into the movie, Jack Dylan Grazier as Billy's best friend / foster brother Freddy really ends up picking up the protagonist slack, and the fact that he's more the hero of his own B-story than he is any kind of sidekick for Billy ends up being a major boon in the movie's favor. Seriously, retool this movie just slightly so that Freddy is the de facto protagonist while Billy is tasked with carrying a bit less of the emotional weight, and tone Levi way the heck down, and I think you end up with a film that's pound for pound as good as the first one. As it stands, we've got a potentially truly great Freddie Freeman movie buried under an interminable mountain of bad Zachary Levi ad-libbing. Grazier is a true talent, playing Freddy, much like in the first film, as an incredibly wise and empathetic kid underneath all of the snark and manic energy, but also a kid who you can kind of understand others being alienated by, if only for how intense his emotions and convictions are. He's got a romantic subplot going with Rachel Ziegler as new character Anne, and the two of them are frankly adorable. And that's not even mentioning how it's Freddy who spends most of the movie in a double act with Jaimon Hansu as the wizard. In other positives, I think much like the first film, this is a very pretty looking movie. With the caveat that I much prefer the brighter, solid color supersuits of the first film, Fury of the Gods still maintains a poppy, Silver Age comic vibe for the most part. And David F. Sandberg really knows how to capture these characters in their powered forms, both as kids in adult bodies who are in over their heads in a wacky fantasy adventure, and downright iconic pillars of strength and heroism when the time calls for it. There's a couple of shots in this movie that are, for lack of a better word, the most super that a superhero's likely to ever look on screen. The fight scenes actually aren't anything too special, but aside from the climax, they also don't overstay their welcome. Between this and the first film, you get the sense that this franchise isn't actually all that concerned with making big or even memorable fight scenes until their third act, which then is largely more memorable for emotional payoffs than they are for any reason to do with the choreography. To address another comparatively smaller negative, I've gotta talk about Wonder Woman's cameo, which has been heavily advertised to the point that I don't consider it a spoiler. It's awful. The movie tries to set it up by giving Billy an entirely obnoxious and frankly out-of-character crush on her, so the idea of her comes up basically every other scene, but that ends up doing nothing to mitigate how out of left field her actual appearance is. Not to make it a DC versus Marvel thing, but by now it's become a pattern that the DCEU's approach to fan service cameos carries all the awkward, audience-alienating contrivance and baggage that the MCU is most often accused of having. This isn't as bad as Batman v Superman stopping cold at the peak of its dramatic tension to show us a bunch of viral trailers for Aquaman, Cyborg, and Flash, but it's honestly kinda close. Wonder Woman's role here is literally to drop into the movie with thunderous fanfare, make a plot point happen, and then drop right on out not even 4 lines of dialogue later. It's bewildering, and maybe could have worked if it happened at an earlier or less plot-critical point in the film, but between that, Levi, and the ultimately just okay villains, you're left with an ultimately just okay movie. The biggest compliment that I can give it is that I am glad that I saw it in theaters, but even then it's borderline. Statistically speaking, odds are that if you're watching this, you haven't seen the movie, but if you did, what did you think? Has this video influenced you to see it one way or the other? Let me know what you think in the comments, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the future.